If you are caring for someone else and not being paid for it, then you are an unpaid family caregiver. And again, people will push to me and say, well, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. My mother took care of me, therefore I will take care of my mother. It's a responsibility. It's just what you do. So in many cultures, it's embedded into it's just what you do. I'm called to serve. So getting people to recognize A, that they are a caregiver is one of our biggest challenges. Then getting them to recognize that taking care of yourself is not selfish.
Welcome to Mastering the Numbers, the podcast dedicated to providing insights into business and entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Joe Mallo.
Hello, everyone. I am Joe Mallo with the Lead Edge Consulting Group. Welcome back to Mastering the Numbers, our second season. And I'd like to welcome my guest for the day, Kristi Horner. She is the founder and the executive director for Courage to Caregivers. Kristi, welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, it took us about a couple months to get back on this podcast together. That's I'll take 100% blame for that. But I am excited to finally have you on to share a little bit more about Courage to Caregivers and your journey.
Great.
So, to start off, can you give the audience a little bit of more information about Courage to Caregivers?
Yeah, we are a nonprofit based here in Northeast Ohio. We launched in Cleveland on the east and west side of Cleveland in a physical location. We were hosted by two community partners at the time and did in-person services. And then you'll hear more about how we pivoted during the pandemic. And that allowed us a huge opportunity. It was in our favor to reach more caregivers, but we launched under the premise of caregiving is hard. And it's hard on the caregiver. Caring for someone with a chronic inconsistent illness takes its toll on you, the caregiver. And am a caregiver. Um, and so launched with three programs: peer support, using our shared lived experience to help someone else with their shared lived experience as an unpaid family caregiver. And then we also have support groups, which we call group coaching sessions, but they're what you might believe to be a support group with you as the caregiver at the center of those groups to build your tools of resilience and use those within the lens of caregiving. And then we also have a prevention program, question, persuade, refer, QPR suicide prevention program that we do both for our caregivers as well as the community. Just believe that's a real life skill everyone needs. And the last program we have is our breathing and meditation program, which is entirely virtual on our YouTube channel. We have 4 years worth of content that has been developed and shared there, especially designed for the caregiver to teach them how to breathe and using your breath as the most portable, sustainable form of taking care of yourself and your mind, body, and spirit to better
Yeah.
care for those you love.
As a family, my wife and I have been through, we've been caregivers multiple times over the years, and I can see where this would have been really, really helpful when we were going through it. So that's
Yeah.
why another reason why I was so excited to have you on to share this story. So what inspired you to start this business, this organization?
Yeah. So I was a caregiver to my younger brother who lived with anxiety, depression, and obsessive compulsive disorder, as well as suicidal ideation. And he reached out in crisis to me one day, and I supported him mentally and emotionally, long distance for 4 years. And what I realized, I had the tools to support him more or less. Um, but I really didn't have the tools to take care of myself during this really difficult time. But I didn't have, in the thick of it and in the midst of it, of all the crises and getting him the help he needed, I didn't recognize that I was not thriving myself. And he always felt better during my times of support and giving him all of myself to both listen and be present for him. But then I would hang up and I would just dissolve, and I just didn't have those tools. So I really wasn't taking care of myself. And after he lost his battle with mental illness to suicide, I recognized that we could be doing a better job of caring for the caregivers in our midst and felt really called to support other caregivers. I honestly was hoping to put my energy around another nonprofit doing some similar work, and there are agencies that both support those with living with mental illness, like National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, and there are other caregiving organizations that do support caregivers, but they predominantly tend to be caregivers of the aging population. Um, and there just really didn't seem to be a place for those caregivers specifically through the lens of caring for yourself. NAMI is the gold standard for psychoeducational programming to learn about your loved one's illness, and they do support the whole family, but it is through that lens of the person with the lived experience. And I really stand firmly that when you take better care of yourself, you provide better care to those you love. And thereby, those relationships get stronger, your caring becomes stronger, whole families are stronger. And our vision is really that leads to communities getting stronger in the process. So that's how we're a little different than the traditional agency that might be out there supporting caregivers.
Right. So, and you've been in business for this organization's been around for how many years?
We're in our seventh year of programming.
Seventh year. Okay. So
Mhm.
how has your company evolved over those 7 years?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, the pandemic really was our friend. I mean, I don't think anyone can really say that necessarily, and I wouldn't say that about the pandemic itself. And yet, what happened was being hosted by two schools on both the east and west side of Cleveland. Schools were among the first to shut down and close their doors to outsiders, not knowing how the illness was being spread at the time. They just said, let's contain ourselves to families within our school systems. So we were forced to seek other locations because, again, we didn't really know how this was working at, and very quickly realized this is not a 2 week ordeal. This is not going away anytime soon. And we had always thought about the virtual space, which would qualify as kind of telehealth in a way. But that felt really big and really fancy, honestly. We
Yeah.
didn't have a Zoom account at that time. We had no vision to serve caregivers outside of Cleveland, Ohio. And yet here we were with this tremendous opportunity. And literally overnight on Friday, March 13th of 2020, that weekend, when we launched our virtual presence, if you will, we grew by 300% in 24
Wow.
hours. And we're able to reach caregivers who were really struggling. Um, Everyone struggled, and everyone has a pandemic story. And as I even tell this, I'm sure everyone in your audience will remember where they were on Friday, March 13th of 2020. And yet, it was a real opportunity for us to look at this in a new way and say to ourselves, who do we want to be? And these are people who are really hurting. The services for their loved ones all shut down. Caregivers had to suddenly work from home, live at home, parent at home. Kids were homeschooling. Kids with special needs now home without any support. And so it was a true layered scenario. And we were able to see people into their homes, get a sense of what life was like for them in ways that we were never able to do before when we were in person. And really, all the barriers to access of coming in person were gone. They could work all day, get dinner on the table, and then just move to a quiet space in their house to take our virtual support groups or a call from another peer. And it allowed for more uh, basically consistent and sustainable attendance. We were seeing much better numbers coming to our groups because
Right.
they could. It was available to them.
Right. Yeah, certainly the pandemic did a lot of things, but one positive thing it's done for a lot of
Mhm.
organizations, I mean, including mine, is just to be able to, everybody's comfortable just being on Zoom, right? And
Mhm.
certainly, people like to get together and talk to each other face to face,
Of
but
course.
at the same time, it's very efficient.
Yeah.
How business has changed. So,
Yeah.
what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've had to overcome as you've been growing the organization the last 7 years?
I think it's really, I'd say one of the number one challenges, and it may not be your traditional business challenge as you support businesses in growing and thriving, but we've had to overcome this barrier where the average person, as you mentioned, you and your wife, we've been caregivers at different points in our lives. And yet, the average person does not see themselves as a caregiver because we tend to, as a mm, as a culture in the US, see caregiving and reserve caregiving for the person who takes care of mom, the person who takes care of a sick person. All of the major hospital networks in our area, Northeast Ohio, consider you've got the nurses and doctors, but all the other aides and people helping in that take care of someone in the hospital as a caregiver. It says it right on their name tag, caregiver.
Right.
So the average then person outside of the healthcare community sees, oh, they're the caregiver, and I am a family member. I'm a daughter, I'm a son, I'm a sister, I'm a partner. Or in my case, I'm a mother, a daughter, a sister, and a partner. But honestly, it's shifting this mindset to if you are caring for someone else and not being paid for it, then you are an unpaid family caregiver. And again, people will push to me and say, well, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. My mother took care of me, therefore I will take care of my mother. It's responsibility. It's just what you do. So in many cultures, it's embedded into it's just what you do. I'm called to serve. So getting people to recognize A, that they are a caregiver is one of our biggest challenges. Then getting them to recognize that taking care of yourself is not selfish. There's the usual thing that most people align with, which is the airline flight attendant's message that says, put on your own oxygen mask first before helping those around you. You only actually have 12 seconds of useful consciousness, should you be in emergency, to put that oxygen mask on, and then you'll pass out. So it is that very cliche, put on your oxygen mask, take care of that. You'll be able to help more people around you. Now, I can guarantee you in a plane going down, my husband will be the first one up and out of his seatbelt to help the very back row all the way to the front, thinking he's going to be the hero because it's selfish to put that on first. When in reality, he'll pass out and I'll be able to help more people because I'll actually have that oxygen mask on. So getting to shift that mindset from taking care of yourself is selfish amidst helping someone else in crisis. Because what happens is there's science behind this that says that the stress of caregiving has been found to take 10 years off of a caregiver's life. But it doesn't have to. We actually equip and empower caregivers to better cope and manage the stress of caregiving. We don't try to eliminate it because that's impossible. I think we originally thought we could, but that's just impossible to remove the stress of caregiving. And so instead, we equip them, we empower them, and that's more sustainable to better manage that daily stress of caring for someone they love. So it's B then recognizing this is stressful, caregiving is stressful, but I can better cope and manage that stress with the tools and the resilience that I have within me to do that because people just treat it as a responsibility. They let themselves go. And then what we have as a society is we have caregivers dying before their loved ones. And that's
Yeah.
where that stress is killing them because they have not taken care of themselves. They've missed doctor's appointments. They've missed their own red flags in their own health. And they've sacrificed everything for the well-being of their loved one when it is possible to do both. And it's
Yeah.
not selfish. So that's again, it may sound very cliche as two very
Yeah.
big challenges, but if someone doesn't identify as a caregiver, I can't help them because they won't be looking for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen firsthand how stressful it is, for someone taking care of a family member 24/7. And then how that stress disappears, at end of life. I mean, nobody wants to see end of life happen, but that
It's
stress just
yeah.
it's just such a burden. Uh,
Hmm.
so I mean, we've
But
seen
it
that
yeah,
firsthand.
but it
Right.
doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. And
Right.
it's a lot of reframing and a lot of tool building and a lot of talking to other people to realize you're not alone in this pain, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be. We can help them.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So in the growth of your
Mhm.
organization, is there anything that you would have done differently along the way?
That's such a great question. So again, two things have evolved and come from over the years. And we had completed a pilot of our three programs in 2019. So going into the pandemic, we squarely had the results of the pilot, which helped inform our next iteration in 2020. but we never had a global pandemic in our business plan as a contingency. And most, I think, aside from hospitals, which I now understand,
Right.
hospitals were aware that we were due in time for a global pandemic. And so they did have contingency plans and they were prepared to face those. The average business, nonprofit or for profit, had a contingency for the pandemic in their business plan. And I bet you, as the people that you've interviewed over time, many businesses flourished and many businesses closed. I'd say we could see that
Yeah.
just looking around us. I mean, Amazon was ripe for a pandemic. We suddenly could have everything we needed delivered to our doorstep. And it was a huge opportunity for them. And it
Yeah.
changed how we do business. Um, it was similar for us certainly a small microcosm compared to Amazon. And we're, of course, nonprofit, so we had nothing to gain other than helping more caregivers reach our services. And yet it allowed us to think about ourselves as a business, take our business plan that helped us to launch, reframe it entirely and as a national organization now, supporting caregivers from coast to coast, every time zone of the US and Canada, and vision ourselves in a new way that we had never thought of ourselves as. Never. I had never seen myself in this space when I launched Courage to Caregivers 7 years ago. I would not have seen myself in the present day place. So we started by refreshing our business plan. Then we immediately put in a contingency for, again, let's hope we don't see another global pandemic in my lifetime, probably not. But we looked at strategic planning and business planning in a new way. And it became this concept that we heard from a training we attended early, like right away in the pandemic, about putting aside strategic planning in the pandemic to be more strategic scenario planning. And we identified the scenarios that we were being affected by in that moment and then what those implications were. And it allowed us to think about both business planning and strategic planning through scenarios. And it created far more contingencies than I ever thought possible, um, including the current global climate of funding opportunities. But we were ready because we had already shifted our thinking around funding and how that could work. And we created even more contingencies for our business plan this year. So I think as we grow, it's about being open to new ways of thinking about your business that, again, as an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, I had never even imagined. I had always seen this as an in-person program, and it's just opened nothing but doors for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I think a lot of people are very, very comfortable being on Zoom
It's
or
great.
any one of those services. And as long as you can still see each other the way you and I can right now, it still makes a big difference.
Yeah.
So,
I felt fancy back
well,
then, but it's good.
yeah, not fancy at all. So you and I, and anybody else that's been through a caregiver situation, we know that there's not a lot of balance, right? Which
Right.
is, and I know that that's part of what you're trying to do is you're trying to help these caregivers get some balance back.
Yeah.
How do you, as a business owner, of a company that's national now, how do you find balance?
Yeah, I think it's balance is a hard word, but because again, I think traditionally we think of balance as we've got this even balance between work and home life or personal and
No.
professional. And yet it's very much that scale, is it the lawyer scale or the legal scale
Yeah.
with the pivot or the pyramid in the middle? And I do think it swings. And just like we pivoted during the pandemic, I pivot on a very regular basis, and I've had to become very nimble. I wouldn't say I'm a rigid thinker by any means. I have several in our household, but I think that I think of my ability to pivot has really improved since launching Courage to Caregivers, and being more flexible with how I view that. I think what becomes so difficult for a caregiver and a professional caregiver, myself, I'm still caring for others. I have two aging parents. I have a young adult son with a traumatic brain injury, who lives at home. My dad of 92 years lived here for 18 years until a recent fall. So I both lived and breathed caregiving. It's such a part of who I am. So there's not much of a line between my professional and personal caregiving. And I work from home. I happen to work in a home office without a door. So, someone strolls in and wants to announce that they're home or what's going on or needs something from me for the two of the people I care for living here. Other relationships also here, four-legged friends who also are here and need me at different times. It can be
Right.
very disruptive. So, putting in place some really kind of strict boundaries, which I can't assume that everyone knows my schedule because I'm lucky to remember my own. So, if I'm going to be recording on a podcast such as this, making sure that the four-legged friends are attended to, and making sure that those who live here with me know that please don't come in and out of the back door because I'll be recording a podcast during this time. Otherwise, they'd be bolting in and out all day and very disruptive. So, setting those boundaries, being clear about communicating those boundaries, um, I would say putting into place a lot of time and space boundaries with the people I care for. So, my aging parents, if they would have it, I would be giving a lot more of myself to them in time and attention. But being a working person and caring for other people outside of them, I've had to be very clear. The capacity of Kristi is finite. There's a lot of me that's infinite. My mindset is infinite. My hope is infinite. My positivity and optimism is infinite, and yet my capacity is finite. So it's being very clear, this is my capacity, and our audience can't see it, but I'm doing like a sphere or a ball, but there's finite boundaries to my capacity, and each person gets a piece, and maybe on
Right.
one day one gets more than the other, but being very clear in communicating and then saying, this is what I've got today. I have 45 minutes to visit. I have an hour to clean out a room or a space. I have this amount of time for a meeting, this amount for work, this amount for different people I care for. So just being really clear about that.
Yeah.
It's never a balance, ever.
Right.
It's a pivot, and it's here's what I've got today, and where is the balance? Some days it's more work than home,
Right.
and sometimes it needs to be more home than work. And I get to do that, identify it, and then communicate it.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I talk to people, I never talk about 50-50. There is no 50-50
Oh my gosh.
in life.
Yeah.
You have to find the right balance for you and your family whether it could be 80-20, it could be 60-40. Like you said, it goes back and forth. One week it's more work, one week it's more family. So I would agree there. So what keeps you motivated and focused to continue to grow?
Personally, I'm just think of myself as a lifelong learner. So it became very easy. Well, I shouldn't say easy. It became clear that when I was going to launch a nonprofit, which I was not set out to do, I'm not an entrepreneur by birth or nature in any way. I do not jump off cliffs. I have a brother-in-law who's an entrepreneur, and he jumps off cliffs without even looking, and he is well suited to be an entrepreneur. I put on all the safety gear and I reluctantly go off that cliff. Like I've been pushed off that cliff to do this work. I really thought I was going to put my energy behind someone else who had already thought of the solution. Lots of solutions out there to this problem. I was looking at it in a very clear, distinct way. And then as I spoke to people who said, I think it's a great vision, let's do it, got pushed off that cliff. But I immediately, as part of most safeguards, set out to be a life, to learn everything I could about this space that I didn't yet know. So being a lifelong learner has been really, really important. Equipping myself with all the tools. I had never written a business plan before, so I went and took a Coursera massive open online class, a MOOC that taught me how to write a business plan for a social enterprise. And that gave me all the tools and the framework for our first business plan because I couldn't do any fundraising before I had a business plan. So I had to do this business plan. Then I led me to the next course to take. Then I said about, learning how to be a grant writer, learning how to, connect and network and all kinds of wonderful things. Um, I think the other thing that's really important to my motivation, and again, as a lifelong learner, I've done a ton of reading about different elements of launching a nonprofit, finding really smart people to surround myself with as coaches and mentors and guides, and always, since day one, being a part of a leadership cohort where I could just learn more from really fabulous coaches and cohorts of other interested learners, and solidly put myself and say, I need this skill next. Let's go. And I'd invest myself in that cohort. And then the next skill. So being surrounded by other lifelong learners who are also eager to learn from each other just builds each other up and holds me accountable. And reading book after book after book, again, of leadership. I would have said I came in as a strong leader, but learning all those other tools I needed to be successful, um, learning from other incredible leaders to really create that growth atmosphere internally that allows me to help more people, because our why is entirely about the caregiver at the center of that story. And so whatever it takes to be able to help a caregiver not to suffer the way I did, honestly, and to I can't alleviate their pain, but I can walk with them as they navigate their pain to emerge stronger and better, and be a story of hope as well.
I think that's critical. I mean, we're going to make mistakes, but hopefully, people can learn from what we do.
Yes.
So I mean, that's the benefit. So what when you look at your organization and how you work with caregivers, and maybe there's others out there that are similar to some degree, what are some of the biggest differentiators in the services you provide compared to maybe others?
Yeah, and I just don't like to look at there being competition in a nonprofit sector. I just don't have that mindset. I have the
Mhm.
mindset, and I just was on a call earlier today. I have the mindset that you could put 10 of us who might be in similar spaces, yet we're all stronger together when we work together versus working in silos. And yet, some of those other more established nonprofits and maybe leaders who think of it as competition see us as we're all competing for the same dollars. Okay, fair. But there's a lot of foundations out there who want us to be working together and would more likely fund us if we were working together on the same project, me doing something that's different than what you do, but together we are better. And so finding those other leaders who are like-minded that way have been a huge opportunity for us. Um, I think that we've done a SWOT analysis as part of our strategic planning, and our strategic planning committee continues to evolve only through the lens of how we could be better. And
Yeah.
so, what can we learn from those folks? And then I really strongly believe bring them in. So, when we did our SWOT analysis, we did it against many of the people we now partner with, of the leaders who have the mindset that, yes, we're stronger together and we're not duplicating services. And my goodness, there just can't be enough of us supporting caregivers to those living with behavioral health needs. It takes all of us in the community to support a family through recovery. And so I think that if there was going to be anything that has us, like, what's our expert seat in this team approach? It's going to be that we exclusively look at the caregiver and their needs, and we're here to prevent mental health diagnosis in the caregiver. Those caregivers who do not attend to their stress of caregiving are at greater risk for developing anxiety, depression, or PTSD by virtue of their caregiving alone. So we're here to prevent that from happening. That's why we see ourselves in the caregiver burnout prevention business. And I don't think anyone else is looking at it through that lens.
Yeah.
We might be trying to solve the same problem, but we're
Right.
looking at it exclusively from the caregiver burnout prevention business. And that's a very different lens. Very different.
Yeah. That's that's exactly what I was trying to figure out, was what's the, what separates you a little bit. So that's great for everybody out there. Where do you see your business in the next 12 to 36 months, or your nonprofit, sorry.
Yeah, and you know what? I just took a deep breath as you asked that question, because I'm like, whoo, that feels like a long time away. I'm one of that person that's like, what do I have to do today and maybe tomorrow? So I think there's a lot of opportunity over the next 12 to 36 months. The global culture has really, or global, I should say, national culture, has changed tremendously with the political change in January that has a lot of nonprofits really, panicked and concerned about their futures. We're solidly in a very strong financial position due to some excellent decision making by our board and investments, and um, we're ready to face that financial hurdle. I think that within the state, we're seeing some exciting development around behavioral health space and the work we do within the context of family peer support. And so I see that as growing, and we would like to think of ourselves as leaders in supporting the future of family peer support within
Yeah.
Ohio and beyond. I think that I would certainly see us as on a growth trajectory. We used to get maybe one new participant a week, and then after the pandemic, it was like one every 2 to 3 days. And now, for instance, just over the weekend, today's a Monday, anyone listening, we had like six
Yeah.
in like three. So it's just increasing very rapidly. Burnout is not going away anytime soon. I think the other thing that we have done is expand our work to look at how we support professional caregivers as well as the unpaid caregiver. The unpaid family caregiver will always be our initial why. But as we support professional caregivers in this space, clinicians, social workers, counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, behavioral health space, we are now CE providers and able to provide CEs. And when we can train the professional caregiver about the special and unique needs of a family caregiver, it's a part of the health and well-being trajectory. Being part of the care team has been really important. And now we're stepping into that corporate space. How can we help companies to better care for the caregivers on their teams? Because companies all have caregivers, but caregivers are very afraid to tell their story at work. They're afraid of the shame and stigma. And if they know I'm a caregiver, will they really trust me in my doing my work? What if I have to step away? I don't want to be seen as weak or less than. So we're there to advocate for caregivers at work and training managers to better bring caregivers into the fold as leaders because their caregiving has made them an extraordinarily empathetic and compassionate employee that we want to retain strong talent. So I see us growing into those side conversations, if you will, even more over the next 12 to 36 months.
I know I've said it before, but I really love what you're doing to help people out there that are in those situations. So I look forward to continuing to watch it grow.
Thank
Final
you.
question for you, and then I'll get you back to work, I guess. Um, just as far as the advice side, let's say you ran into another entrepreneur. They're a couple years into getting their nonprofit up and running, but they're struggling a little bit. What kind of advice would you give them?
Mm. And I'm going to start with giving two pieces of advice that were given to me that I think about every single day. Not a day has gone by. Because, like I said, before I launched, I met with hundreds of people, professionals, coaches, mentors, really smart people doing really great work in all fields. And the first person said to me, because I wanted to do six pilots of six different programs, she's like, that's too much. You're going to do two. We ended up doing three because I just couldn't let that third go. We let our needs assessment and then our focus groups guide which programs we launched with, but do less and do it better. Do less and do it better. So she said, you might
Yeah.
want to do six because you think they're going to be great, but do less and do it better. Then the next thing a really smart person told me as I was setting up my chart of accounts within QuickBooks, because when I first launched in QuickBooks, I thought I knew what I was doing and I thought I had trained myself in QuickBooks, but that was a foreign language to me at the time and I had to actually blow it up. So then I went to one of our partners in Cleveland, Business Volunteers Unlimited, who matched me with a coach who got me a QuickBooks expert locally who's an accountant. And she just had me step back to a 30,000-foot view and said, listen, you're thinking too narrowly. That's why we have to blow it up. And you have to think about your future self. Do not think about baby courage to caregivers. Think about fully grown adult version of courage to caregivers and where you will be in 10, 20 years from now and behave like that version of yourself. So
Yeah.
every single decision you make, don't make it through today's lens. Think about it as your future, yet to be maybe even seen or identified version, because you'll make those big picture decisions much better. And so I think about not just our chart of accounts in QuickBooks, but every decision now. What would our future version of ourselves think about the decision we make today and stick with that? And then the last two little pieces of advice, and I don't like to use the words advice because we don't do that within the lens of even our peer support. We think of it as empowerment. So if someone were to call me for some coaching about what I do and how I've done it, think of this as empowerment, but
3:52 p.m.
Connections will get you everywhere. So reach out and connect and leverage everyone in your LinkedIn profile to find those really rich connections. And then at the end of every conversation, would you be willing, Joe, to connect me to 2 or 3 people that you think could benefit from Courage to Caregivers? And I'd be happy to connect you, Joe, with 2 or 3 people who would benefit from the work that you do. And always be a lifelong learner. Always embrace a growth mindset and be willing to learn from other people, other places, your mistakes, take a course, read a book, and always be a lifelong learner with a growth mindset because nothing is impossible.
I think those are great bits of advice. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to spend it with me and to talk to the audience. If anybody out there wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do it?
Thanks, Joe. It would be either through email, Kristi, Kristi, at courage2, caregivers, plural.org, or our website, www.couragetocaregivers.org. All of the information on our programmings. We have lots of tools that are meant to be shared widely, lots of information by diagnosis, lots of great self-care tips, or social media and LinkedIn, of course. Welcome anyone to connect, to work together, and again, serve more caregivers together. We're stronger together.
Well, I'll make sure that all that information is available to anybody that listens to the podcast as well. So once again, thank you very much for taking some time out, and for everybody out there listening, thank you for taking part as well. And we'll catch you on the next episode of Mastering the Numbers. Kristi, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Anytime.
You've just tuned into another episode of Mastering the Numbers. We hope you found valuable insight to boost your financial success. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform and leave us a review. Keep pushing forward, and thanks for listening.